You're on board the Newstrack. I'm Rahul Kanwal. More evidence emerges to suggest that the coronavirus actually came out of a laboratory in China's Wuhan, and that global story is my top focus on the Newstrack.
Coronavirus made in Chinese lab. Did China design the COVID virus? Lab leak theory now 100% believable. Chorus grows to probe China. Will China come clean on the virus origin? That's our top focus on the Newstrack.
Was the coronavirus designed in a laboratory in China? After 18 top scientists sought a probe into the Wuhan lab, a report by the US government national laboratory has concluded that the COVID virus could have actually leaked from a lab. This classified report, which found its way to the US media, calls for more investigations. This after US President Biden and health expert Anthony Fauci also demanded an independent probe.
Nearly 4 million deaths. Every country on earth affected. Untold billions in damage. A bleeding world of uncertainty. Could it all have begun right here in a biological lab in China's Wuhan? Was the virus responsible for COVID-19 irresponsibly engineered here and unleashed upon the world by a careless or insidious China? The hunt for the truth has just received its biggest boost so far. A US government national laboratory report on the origins of COVID-19 has concluded it is plausible that the virus leaked from a Chinese lab in Wuhan and that this deserves further investigation. The revelation comes in a Wall Street Journal special report quoting people familiar with the classified document. The study, prepared this time last year by the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California, was used by the State Department under President Trump when it began the quest to nail down the origins of the virus. While speculation and political finger-pointing have muddled the waters in favor of China, this US report is hugely damning, since this assessment drew on genomic analysis of the COVID-19 virus. The revelation comes just weeks after President Biden said he had ordered his administration to nail down the origins of the virus. China has totally stonewalled all global attempts to investigate the Wuhan lab. Suspicious conduct on the back of nearly 4 million deaths. The genomic analysis study adds meat to the two scenarios widely considered to be the only two possibilities. That the virus escaped after a laboratory accident thanks to China's extremely poor safety standards, or that it emerged from the human contact with an infected animal.
Spike protein, the protein that attaches to cells.
Now an explosive video of Peter Daszak boasting about the manipulation of killer SARS-like coronavirus carried out by colleagues in China has also emerged.
Then when you get a sequence of a virus, and it looks like a relative of a known nasty pathogen, just like we did with SARS. We found other coronaviruses in bats, a whole host of them. Some of them looked very similar to SARS. So we sequenced the spike protein, the protein that attaches to cells. Then well, I didn't do this work, but my colleagues in China did the work. You create pseudoparticles, you insert the spike proteins from those viruses, see if they bind to human cells. And each step of this, you move closer and closer to this virus could really become pathogenic in people.
Dr. Daszak's EcoHealth Alliance is in the eye of storm for sending $600,000 to the Wuhan lab that is seen as the source of coronavirus. Dr. Peter Daszak also thanked Dr. Anthony Fauci for downplaying the theory that the coronavirus may have leaked from a lab in April 2020. But with more information filtering out, seeking closer scrutiny of the Wuhan lab, Dr. Fauci has also called for more investigation.
I do not have any accounting of what the Chinese may have done, and I'm fully in favor of any further investigation of what went on in China. However, I will repeat again, the NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan.
The big question now is whether the new studies would strengthen the world's pressure on China. Bureau Report, India Today.
Not just scientists and governments, but several independent investigators and open source intelligence experts have been working tirelessly to probe China's role. Among them is a Pune-based scientist couple and a Bengal-based person who calls himself the Seeker.
Was the COVID-19 virus made in a Wuhan lab? Is the coronavirus China's biological weapon? Are Chinese authorities hiding facts from the world? These are some of the questions that the world has been asking since more than a year. As the world awaits answers, a scientist couple in Pune have made some startling revelations. Dr. Monali Rahalkar and Dr. Rahul Baholikar claim that they have evidence to show that COVID-19 virus originated from a lab and not from a seafood market in Wuhan. And they are basing their findings to extensive studies. The couple say they have found that a close relative of SARS-CoV-2 virus was collected from a bat-infested mine shaft by the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China's Yunnan province. 6 miners who were hired to clean it were infected with a pneumonia-like illness. 3 of them subsequently died. According to the Pune couple, Wuhan labs were experimenting on the virus, and there is a suspicion that they did some changes in the genome of the virus, making it deadlier.
In China, in the southern region, there was a mine shaft in Mojang, Yunnan, and there were 6 miners which were employed to clean the bat feces in that mine. It was a copper mine, an abandoned mine. So they got ill one by one after they cleaned the bat feces, and they had pneumonia. It was a lethal pneumonia, and 3 of them had died.
The scientists claim that Dr. Zhong Nanshan, widely known as the Corona Doctor of China, had substantiated their theses.
He remotely observed these cases. So he did video conferencing, and he concluded that it was a primary viral infection, whereas the Wuhan Institute had said that it is a fungal infection. The conclusion of the thesis was this could be due to a SARS-like coronavirus.
As anonymous Twitter user in India, only known as the Seeker, has also arrived at conclusions that match the findings of the couple.
The Seeker gave us a MSc thesis in Chinese, and it was translated by him by using Google Translator, and from that we came to know the further story about these miners, what happened to them.
The discovery by the Pune scientist couple comes even as global powers are mounting pressure on China to share information on the origin of the virus. Increasingly, the world is veering to the opinion that China has a lot to answer for. With Pankaj Khelkar in Pune, Bureau Report, India Today.
The lab leak theory was earlier on the fringes of the scientific world. It would be described as a conspiracy theory. Now it's moving center stage with more and more renowned scientists, academicians lending their intellectual heft and demanding a thorough probe into the origins of the Wuhan virus. Joining me on the Newstrack, I want to welcome first Dr. Li Ming Yan, a PhD virologist joining us from New York. Some of the work that she's been doing has generated headlines not just in India but across the globe. With us on this broadcast is Dr. Julian Tang, Honorary Associate Professor, Clinical Virologist at the University of Leicester in the United Kingdom. We have with us N.R. Tenjen, who's a commentator from Beijing. I want to go across to Dr. Yan first. Can you explain on the basis of the research that you've done, the studies that you've put out, why you're so convinced that the virus that emerged from China cannot just be dismissed as a natural virus, that there is something amiss about what happened in Wuhan, which needs to be investigated far more thoroughly by authorities in China and elsewhere than has been the case so far?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. So briefly, I want to tell people I'm the one of the first scientists in the world to get into real research about COVID-19 virus based on my intelligence and also my network, very unique, extensive network involving doctors and researchers and labs, both military and civilian, and also China authorities, including CDC, back to December 2019. And also, I'm a medical doctor. At the same time, I'm the PhD virologist in the top coronavirus lab in the University of Hong Kong, WHO reference lab. So I also work with a lot of the WHO top experts in this field. And based on all the evidence, no matter scientific ones or intelligence ones, and my understanding knowledge about China government, I can tell people this is actually the virus after a lot of gain of function research and then gained a lot of functions to target human and owned by the China government and also developed by Chinese military and also civilian scientists together, then released to Wuhan intentionally, finally lead to the pandemic. So this is all the things you can verify online in my reports, and also you can verify by reading the other independent results. So no way there is virus come from the nature. So this virus actually, according to U.S. investigator, bioweapon investigator Asia's word, the odd of the virus come from nature is 1 in 13 billion. So this is unrestricted bioweapon developed by China government. That's why we really need to know the origin of this virus, because we would not let this happen again and again. And
so you're calling this a bioweapon developed by the Chinese army, but how strong is your evidence to back that claim? Because what we've seen over the last few weeks is a call for investigation into the origins of the virus, lots of serious academics saying that it may have been a lab leak, that it wasn't a deliberate weapon that was released in the outside world, rather something that just happened to slip out of the Wuhan virus lab, as opposed to something that the Chinese army wanted to unleash on the world, as it were.
You see, even last year, people strongly believe the scientists and also media told you that this is from nature, right? Yes, now the people start to shift to the right correction. I mean, they realize it's from lab because no evidence is from nature. But also, China government definitely doesn't want anyone realize it, because China doesn't want to be held accountable, and this is unrestricted by weapon, so they can use it to counter the world. That's Chinese Communist Party's idea, communism ideas. This is their strategy developed for over 20 years. Especially recent years, they accelerate it, recruit advanced knowledge, and using the international scientists' help and get money from U.S. by cheating and other ways. So that's how they do it. And finally, their success. So this virus actually developed based on one unique bad coronavirus found by PLA, by Chinese army, and owned by them. And then in this virus, they leave a lot of evidence, even in the genome, like in the virus fingerprint. So all these things can show that this is really Chinese Communist Party's novel bioweapon, not traditional.
So Ainar Tianjin, you're seeing now, not just in the fringes of science and research, but increasingly center stage, the view seems to be that the genome sequence is such that it doesn't seem to be a naturally occurring genome. Rather, it seems to be something which is engineered in a biolab. Now, Dr. Li Mengyang is convinced that this is actually a bioweapon, even if that's not the case. And even if everyone's not fully convinced about that yet, there seems to be an increasing understanding and belief in the scientific world that somewhere, someone in that Wuhan virus lab leaked, maybe accidentally, maybe intentionally, leaked. So this pandemic that China has now thrusted on the world, as it were, actually came out of a Wuhan lab rather than the market where animals were being sold.
Well, I think it's a far cry to say that, a number of scientists have said rather than it cannot be ruled out. They've also said that you can't rule out UFOs and that the fact that we've been visited by aliens. So there are many things you can't rule out, but that doesn't necessarily make them true. I would like to ask one question of my colleague, Dr. Li Mingyang. Can she tell me one paper she's written that's been peer-reviewed by accepted journal like the Scientific American, the American Medical Journal, where she's talked about or displayed her knowledge or understanding or put something forward about gain of function research, anything on COVID-19?
Okay, let Dr. Yan respond to it.
I have the COVID-19 paper published on Nature as co-first author, and also COVID-19 paper published on Lancet Infectious.
No,
if you want to know me, please check the Nature paper
publication?
I published on last May.
When?
Nature last May. Please check it.
When?
Cannot you hear last May?
You're saying you know all of the stuff. Tell us what publication, all right, and when this was published. Surely you remember.
My publication of COVID-19 virus published on Nature Journal, the top medical journal last May, and that is the best animal model.
No, that was an opinion piece. It wasn't a research piece. It simply said what you said so far, which is a whole bunch of conspiracy theories based on your dislike of the Chinese government.
So I
understand that. That's your
Okay, let us speak. Let us speak. Let Dr. Yan speak. You've made a few points.
Any kind of scientific paper that you've authored that has been peer-reviewed.
You've made a point. Let her respond. Dr. Yan.
Yeah, I think please let Mr. Tangent understand what is scientific paper, what is research paper, what is research about COVID, what is real publication. I had more than 10 publications, and also 2 of them come from last March to last May. One is in the Lancet Infectious Disease using COVID-19 patients' antibody to develop the test and also to evaluate. And another one is about COVID. Lancet Infectious Disease, the top infectious disease top journal. Please tell Mr. Tangent to understand what is the scientific journal. He seems to lack of a lot of knowledge. I know he's not a scientist, but he's wasting people's time, like people not focus on the real talking.
You keep saying that you were doing this, but there's no record of you
March and
published
last May. You can check.
Okay, let us speak. N.R. Tangent, you're being a lawyer here. You're heckling her. She's made a point. Allow her to explain what she's saying.
She's making a point. She's making accusations. The issue is, I've asked her directly.
No, so we're asking her the same question. How strong is the body of evidence to back your charges, Dr. Yan?
In the end, as I said before, you cannot say that because a scientist says you can't rule it out. Dr. Fauci has said exactly the same thing he said before. He just said, listen, if it's going to make everybody feel better, and we need to figure out where it started, we can't rule anything out.
Okay, Dr. Yan, are we at a stage where we're saying we can't rule this out, or are we now heading towards a zone where you are saying with greater degree of confidence, can you turn that fader down, please? When you're saying with a greater degree of confidence that this seems to have come out of a Chinese lab?
So from the beginning, there are always 2 possibilities, nature and lab. But China government and also the scientists and also their helpers like Mr. Tangent try to tell people the lab origin is conspiracy. Now people waste over 1 year, 0 evidence to prove it's from nature. As I said, 1 in 13 billion calculated by the supercomputer in America to show the out from nature occurring. So this is the things people really to think about.
So can you explain, Dr. Yan, in as simple to understand way as possible, how compelling is your evidence? What is the evidence? Because people like N.R. Tangent contesting it very hotly. What is your evidence to prove that this isn't an act of nature, rather that it came out of a Chinese virus laboratory?
Okay, in theory, there is a chance, like Asia said, 1 in 13 billion. But in fact, there was something called fact. what really had happened before. So that is reality, it's the truth. So what I want to tell people is from the beginning, last January, I kept telling people the truth is the COVID-19 virus is come from the lab, and the labs, not only Wuhan lab get involved, but also Chinese military labs involved, because this is China government's long-term strategy to develop the unrestricted bioweapon and finally use it to attack people. So that's what happened in China from end of 2019. I can tell people, smart people have the common sense people who really want to understand this. They will try to see the evidence. They will finally understand what happened. But people like Mr. Tangen on behalf of China government, they only know misinformation and deny, because this is also part of China's strategy. You have seen it from the TV for over 1 year. I'm sure Indian people are familiar with that.
Okay, and now Tengen, now here's the problem. With people like yourself refusing to, just hear my question, sir. Just hear my question before you respond. If you are not willing to consider the possibility of this being a leak from a Wuhan virus laboratory, then how will it ever emerge whether this is true or not? China has so far stonewalled all efforts at a thorough investigation. Scientists have been asking for patient zero, the ones who were in the Wuhan lab who fell ill first before this pandemic really took off. China is not giving access to their medical history and records. In the absence of this, how will this question ever be fully solved and answered?
Well, I mean, China is not trying to give more oxygen to the kind of wild conspiracy theories that are out there, and I can understand it. I mean, if you read the press, if you simply listen even to Indian television, media, China's been convicted before there's any evidence. So they're concerned that somebody coming in, as my colleague over there, she's not interested in any kind of facts. She's just interested in the conclusions that she wants to back up. So at this time, yes, there has to be a thorough investigation, and it does have to come under international auspices. But it's not going to be the U.S. or India just pushing some sort of line to, in essence, take a lot of oxygen away from, let us say, domestic issues involving COVID-19. So at this juncture, it's probably best to have a new study brought in. But it has to be people who are scientists, not politicians, not people who are pushing the agenda, who have a grudge one way or another. I mean, that's the only way you can do this.
Julian Tang, you're a clinical virologist in the University of Leicester. Who do you think should be doing a probe of this nature? It cannot be the American politicians. It cannot certainly be the Indian government. It cannot be the Chinese government either. WHO is not being allowed also. Who do you think, given the polarized nature of this debate, is best suited to go out and try and crack this question, and how important is it to resolve this mystery?
Right, so the two sides of this equation. On the one side, the virus seems very well adapted to human-to-human transmission. This is not impossible in nature from a zoonotic transmission event. On the other hand, we haven't sampled every single possible source or reservoir for this virus in China or elsewhere. So I think that you cannot say either way about where this virus came from. And I don't think China released this deliberately. It just seems rather kind of self-destructive. So I think there's a lot to be said on both sides of this argument before making any conclusions. If you want to have a neutral party go in to look at this in a more objective manner, then I suspect that it won't be, it certainly won't be a North American team, and it probably won't be one of the Southeast Asian teams either, because they're very polarized for or against China. It may have to be a European team where there's no evidence of bias or funding for these types of experiments for or against China's politics.
Dr. Venkatesh Rao,
I'd agree with that.
You are following a group of researchers who are looking at this question in India. Can you give us a sense of what the research, because you've got the likes of Dr. Li Mingyan in the United States and elsewhere who are investigating this. You're tracking what the Indian researchers are saying. In fact, a lot of the groundwork which led to us being able to establish that there is more that needs to be probed, and it's not as simple as it seemed, or at least as the Chinese government was initially claiming, has actually come out of a bunch of researchers in India who are working on this. So tell us what you think the level of evidence is to suggest that this could have been a leak out of a lab in Wuhan.
I am basing, I had written in the Sunday Guardian last Sunday. This was the fifth of a series of articles, and these are based on publications in peer-reviewed medical journals. And the most important, I thought, was two articles which had been the studies done in January of last year, much before all this politics and cover-up started off. One of them was by doctors from the Wuhan Institute of Virology in the Lancet journal. This was in the end of towards the end of January, and this is I have given details of it in my article, and they very clearly gave the timeline for every case of which was tested with RT-PCR test and proved to be having this infection and admitted in Wuhan. And according to the timeline they have shown in the chart, the first admission was on December 1st, and the next admissions were on December 10th. And they have listed out in a bar chart all those admissions. They have personally spoken to those patients and found out if they have gone to the wet market or not. The first three patients in that had nothing to do with the wet market. And the U.S. intelligence says that it was in the later part of November, and there were three people from the lab who were infected. So these two match what the U.S. intelligence said and what these doctors from Wuhan Institute published. And the other important thing was what you were referring to. This was the first attempt at publishing a paper study on the genomic sequence of the Wuhan of the virus, of this what was called that time a novel coronavirus. Now we are calling it a SARS-CoV-2 virus. Now this study showed very clearly that there were 4 inserts in the coronavirus, this novel coronavirus, which was not to be found in any other coronavirus. So then they looked up the published genomic sequences of other pathogenic viruses and found that these 4 inserts were from the HIV, which is the AIDS virus. And to their very significant point in this was that the 4th insertion is for what is called as the furin cleavage site in the spike protein. The spike protein is what the virus uses to attach to the ACE2 receptor in the human airway, and the first part, which is the S1, helps it attach it, and S2, the second part of the spike protein, helps inject the genomic sequence, the genomic material from the virus into that human cell. And the furin enzyme happens to be human specific. So this furin cleavage site was specific to the human being. And this furin enzyme on the cell surface of a human tissue will cleave any protein which has a human cleavage site. So what it did was to make it very perfect at the exact spot where it had to be cleaved, so that the infectivity and the efficiency of this virus to infect human beings was increased.
Okay.
Now, this parts of this, I'll tell you further, this was put up for for review on what is called as a pre-print website. That is where all these kind of articles are put. One of the virologists took down this, downloaded this article and sent it to me. This was again towards the end of January. And this, what happened was there were so many phone calls and messages to these scientists saying, no, you are, how can you say this, etc. And they then took down this article to review if they had made any mistake. When they found that they had not made any mistake, they then tried to publish it in peer-reviewed journals. And no journal was willing at that time, this is February of last year, to accept this publication. Then a third paper that made me very suspicious was a study done by a pharmacologist sitting in US.
Okay.
He's an Argentinian. He's of Argentinian origin. And he published a paper initially somewhere in the middle of last year, and in which he studied the spike protein of this virus to see how the efficiency of medicines and vaccines can be improved. And he later did a molecular study of this, and then published another article, again in the American ACS, the American Chemical Society Journal, saying that this was specifically engineered to attack human cells.
Okay, now those are important points that you've laid out. In fact, evidence the world over is pointing towards China's Wuhan lab as possibly the place where this virus originated. The SARS-CoV-2 ravaged the world in the last 1.5 years, but the WHO insists this is politics and not science. The world body has expressed its helplessness in compelling China to facilitate further investigation. Sneha Mordani with this report.
Is this the place where the coronavirus originated and leaked into the world? Evidence has been growing each week to suggest that this lab in Wuhan is where the dreaded SARS-CoV-2 emerged from. A secret China is doing everything it can to block from global confirmation. But the World Health Organization, already under steady criticism for pandering to China through the pandemic, has an interjection that the international fingers point at China don't count as scientific evidence.
We would, though, like for everyone out there to separate, if they can, the politics of this issue from the science. This whole process is being poisoned by politics.
The World Health Organization has said while further investigations are needed, it can't compel China to open itself up to a global probe. A stunning claim amidst a pandemic that has already taken 4 million lives and devastated every single country on earth.
WHO doesn't have the power to compel anyone in this regard or in other regards. And in that sense, WHO doesn't have the power to investigate or enter countries without the express permission and cooperation of that country.
It is true that ever since it was founded in 1948, the WHO has been subjected to laws of sovereign states who can choose to admit their officials or exclude them. But can this legacy policy stand in the face of global devastation? China's hugely suspicious lack of transparency. Above all, allow a full investigation is the biggest question. But even with millions of deaths and uninterrupted global suffering, it's power politics that's at play. China is behind the UK and the US, but still a major financial contributor to the World Health Organization. China's rising financial contributions increase its heft and influence. Cooperation between the World Health Organization and China has been on the rise, be it along China's Health Silk Road initiative or in support of the WHO's goal of universal health coverage of 2030. Taiwan's continued exclusion from the World Health Organization is evidence of Beijing's influence. Throwing up its hands in the face of China's Great Wall of Secrecy, the World Health Organization, meanwhile, notes other challenges.
It has taken years of study in order to be able to even understand the basics of that. We will continue in the second phase to propose the necessary studies to take our understanding and knowledge to the next level.
Earlier this year, a joint international team comprising of 17 Chinese and 17 international experts from other countries carried out one leg of investigations in Wuhan from the 15th of January to the 10th of February. But it's the follow-up that China is now blocking. The World Health Organization also says that this was only part one of the investigations. The studies will continue. The question is whether the next round of investigations will also be looking at the Wuhan lab leak theory once again, given the increasing demands to have a thorough and detailed investigation into this aspect of the outbreak of coronavirus. In New Delhi, Sneha Mordani for India Today.
So the question is, what happens next? The WHO has been accused of siding with China. The other problem is that the WHO is now expressing helplessness. In this situation, Dr. Lee Meng-Yan, at a time when opinion is so deeply polarized, how do you think we can possibly try to address this question and try and find some definitive answer?
Actually, the question is, how could people realize that it's not does not depend on the China government's response? Because from the beginning, we know China government only will deny and also spread misinformation through their colleagues, like the scientists and also like the people in the media, or like people who do the propaganda, like Mr. Tengen. So all these are the part of their strategy. So people should use their common sense and their thinking to judge the other evidence. For example, I tell the Lancet actually it's compromised with China government. I tell the WHO is compromised with China government. And Ms. Fauci is actually lying because he realized it should not come from nature. All this I told people from last January to February, gradually verified by emails, by other evidence. And also the scientific evidence I present actually includes the ones Dr. Kui recently published, and which makes the whole world get shocked. These are just part of my evidence I describe. So say from scientific world and also intelligence evidence, people already can realize what happened. So of course, China won't allow you to investigate. Of course, killer won't allow the policeman to go to their home if they can. So the thing is, the whole world should understand what happened. People should push your government to do the legislation and also really punish China, not only for money, but also for their ideology and their conquer wish to ruin the whole civilization. We need to solve it from the end. So people, I think they can realize what happened if they want.
Dr. Venkatesh Rao, given that China is not welcoming investigators, not allowing them to come in, given that the WHO itself is expressing helplessness, how do we get out of the polarizing nature of this debate towards actually coming up with some concrete, empirical, data-based, research-based answers?
This is exactly what I have been doing. See, when you are in danger of massive criminal liabilities, no government, and definitely not the communist government, would allow you to detail the investigation. And since the WHO thing didn't work, I was looking at what has already been published. And this is what I have detailed in my articles. It is like a self-declaration when you publish something. And in these publications, I have listed in my article the various collaborators they have listed, the various funding agencies they have listed. Everything is there.
And the Wuhan Institute Virology own website mentions that it has a collaboration with the Defense Science and Technology Organization of Pakistan. So obviously there is a defense tie-up, and it is very clear that the institute is under military control. The person who is in charge of it is a very well-known military scientist. So, and when the government doesn't allow you, and the entire data of this Wuhan Institute, which was available, has been removed from the website. So all this will actually lead to suspicion.
Absolutely, it's the actions of the Chinese government that are raising further doubts. If data was publicly available,
yes,
if medical histories of the first set of patients could have been tracked by scientists the world over, then we would have had an answer. Maybe it isn't a virus leak from a lab. Maybe it is a naturally occurring virus. But given how China is acting, you know, it's not creating any sense of confidence in the rest of the world. It's only adding to suspicion and doubt.
Well, I mean, obviously, if you think China's guilty, you're going to say that every action they do is somehow adding to that. But I don't know. I understand my colleague has been very careful. He hasn't done any research himself, but he's cherry-picked through what he believes creates a conspiracy theory that China and the USA and Pakistan were doing gain-of-function research for a bioweapon that somehow leaked out of the lab. That doesn't sound very plausible, as as the other colleague said from, I believe, Great Britain. So, you know, at this time, it would be better if there was an independent, study that was done. I liked the idea that you have somebody from the European Center who's, basically has not engaged in this kind of political accusations. Just stick to the science, do the best they can. But as to this issue about the first 3 patients, during the show, it became clear that people think that this has been proven. If you go back and you read, which I did, the intelligence report, they say unknown reasons, 3 people hospitalized. We want to know why. That does not mean that they had COVID-19. So, I mean, and there's no evidence from the Chinese side. They say this is a figment of imagination. So what you have is the CIA, which is both spying and disinformation, which clearly does not like China, sees it as a threat, coming up with a supposed fact that 3 people were in fact infected, or they don't even say that they were. They say we don't know
has his hand up. I'm also running out of time. So quick final word, Mr. Rao.
Yes, the article in Lancet published in January of last year by the doctors from Wuhan, not from the Wuhan Institute, but from the Wuhan hospital, says that the first 3 patients had nothing to do with the wet market. I am not saying it. It is the Wuhan Institute, Wuhan doctors themselves saying it. It is published in Lancet. The graph is there, and I put it out in the article that I published. Look, anyone can see it. It is out in Lancet in the 3rd week of January. They have the whole, the entire month of December, who were all the patients who were admitted and whose RT-PCR test proved it was this coronavirus.
Well, there are gaping holes.
And they have questioned each patient as to if they went to the market or not.
There are gaping holes in what we've heard so far. The only way to try and resolve this is by having a non-partisan independent investigation, and for all data to be made available about what was happening in that lab, about the medical history of the initial set of patients. Only then will this question get satisfactorily answered. And given what all of us have been through, determining the actual origin of the virus is significant. For the time being, Dr. Li Meng Yang, for the work that you're doing, thank you. Dr. Julian Tang, interesting to have an alternate perspective from you, NR Tenjen, and Dr. P.S. Venkatesh Rao for joining me on the Newstrack. Thank you very much. I'm slipping into a break.